You're like, just started already. I'm going to take some time and turn it over to our author. Before we get into our questions, I would love for you to just give us a little bit of background into what led you to writing. Um, how's your spirit feeling joining us today? Are we like the first book club you've ever been in community with in this way? Or, and I guess lastly, what are questions or expectations you have of us today? Like, I'd love to ground us in some of that.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I am so happy to be here. As I mentioned to maybe some of you who came on a little later, I'm from New York originally, from Queens, so it feels good to be kind of in New York with all of you. And so it's wonderful to be amongst you today, this evening. I just was always someone who wrote. I'm actually thinking a Bronx memory, one of my mom's really good friend who was our aunt, like we called her auntie. She was the one who had all of the events at her house, Christmas, Easter, all of the things. And we'd be at her house and I would be in the bedroom as a little girl where all the coats were piled on the bed writing. So that was me as a kid. I just loved to write. I loved to just get the words on in my little journal. So that's how I kind of always was. And it's kind of surreal to sort of be a published writer for so many years. I dreamed of it and now, I'm living that life. And it feels just it's great to be here. So thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I guess I want to open it up to the group if there are any initial questions about the book or characters that folks may have. And what I want to just give a small reminder to is let's be mindful because we do have a very large group today and we want to make sure, even if we have things to share, we want to make sure there's opportunity for other people to share. Ask more than one question, ask more than five, but let's make sure we're giving space in between so folks have that opportunity. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, let's open it up to the group. Any initial questions about characters, plot points, maybe our author's inspiration around the book?
Hi,
I
good
just want
evening.
to ask,
Oh,
um,
I'll go real quick. Good evening. I'm so happy you all host this. Stephanie put me on a couple months ago. This is the first time I've been able to attend, and I'm thoroughly enjoying reading this book and um, getting to know the characters. And I appreciate the subtle nuance. So the class, the history, the political, social economic things that these characters are talking about. So my question is really, can you just give us a little background around, and I'm assuming you're Ghanaian, but why was it important for you to center this book in Ghana and Togo? And how did you decide on what um, landscape markers to choose, but then also what bits of history that you throw in there. And I feel like it's set in the 60s or 70s. So if you can just like share some of those, how you came to some of those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a great question. So I am from Ghana. My parents are born in Ghana. I was born in the States, but my parents raised me. So, and I actually went to high school in Ghana. So I lived there for 3 years. So Ghana is something or a place for me that where I really sort of come alive creatively. Whenever I go to Ghana, like I feel like that's where I get like creative centering. And I always leave like inspired to write something new or to work on something, etc. So that's why I chose Ghana. The specific, so when I sort of arrived at the focus of the book, that the book would be about marriage. There were a lot of little reasons or choices that I made. So one is in the 70s. So the book begins in at the end of 1972 going into 73, and that is the beginning of an administration that was known as the girlfriend administration, because It was a military regime, a military coup, and the leader was General Ignatius Achampong, and he was a relatively young soldier who, took over the government, and suddenly, like, the nation's purse is at his and all these young soldiers' disposal. And so they were, spending on women, had multiple girlfriends. So it felt like a good sort of atmosphere to set these questions for a young woman thinking about marriage. And gender dynamics. My dad told me tons of stories of, like, being a young man during that time, and how, like, the only way to have fun was to know a girl who was dating a soldier, because that girl would have gotten a car from her boyfriend or something like that, or had the money. So he really sort of helped me situate into, like, what was it like in that time period. And then the reason why I chose this sort of Ghana Togo situation is because, many of you are aware of, like, the Berlin Conference in the 1800s, and how they, like, carved up Africa. And so Ghana, of course, is one of them. And Ghana, Togo, Burkina Faso, and Ivory Coast, which are the countries that are, like, immediate neighbors to Ghana, um, the groups, or the ethnic groups, were sort of, when those borders went up, a lot of these ethnic groups were sort of, found themselves across borders from one another, but they're the same people. So my mom's side is Ewe, and the Ewe people are in, parts of Nigeria, but a lot of them are in Togo and in Ghana. So I wanted to kind of honor that sort of, that marriage, if you will, of these two, the same people, but now they've sort of been split down the middle by culture and country, and by language, because Togo is a francophone country and Ghana is an anglophone country. So I wanted to sort of make that point in the book.
I like the cover.
Oh, thank you. It's
I
funny.
like how you have the hands united, and that's a kente cloth print,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how
So
you even the fingernails. Is that to express the sisterly love?
it wasn't so when we were sort of putting together ideas, like, my publisher, my editor asked me, like, do you have any ideas for what you want the cover to be? And I was actually thinking more about the ground nut or the peanut, like at the beginning of the book when it says that proverb. And I was thinking, oh, it's got to be smashed ground nuts. And so they, like, put together some mock-ups. And this
Okay,
was something that they did on their own. And I was like, this is what it should be. I love it.
I
Because
like it.
I had spoken to them. Another thing that I had spoken to them about was sort of like um the threads that kind of connect us.
Mm-hmm.
So the kente idea kind of came out of that, and just yeah, but I love it. I love the fact that, you have in that blue, in the navy blue behind the hands, is like you have New York skyline and the Accra skyline. So
Right.
it's sort of this idea of, like, these hands, like, kind of holding across these two different places, but they're all united, and yeah, so.
One of my favorite parts of the book was when she got to Sammy's house. Oh my goodness. I I was clutching my pearls from where she had come from. I was like, how's she gonna deal with this? Very nice book.
Thank
Okay, I'm almost sad to almost get to the end.
thank you.
From the beginning of the book was like clutching your pearls. It was giving Tyler Perry like a little bit.
A little bit, right?
The drama, yeah, the
No,
drama
but
of it.
But just segueing, I know early in the conversation you expressed that, the story took place in 1970 and that, you what made you, focus on that time frame was your conversations with your father. Did you do any other additional research to immerse yourself in that time period in Ghana and Togo in that region?
I did so much research, and so this book actually started out as a much bigger book. It was supposed to be initially set between 1962 and 1999. And for years, I did so much research. Like, I could tell you about each presidential regime, the coups, all of the different things. So I did a lot of research, but when I narrowed it down and I decided, like, okay, it's going to be about marriage, it's going to be set in this particular administration, in Ghana, and then the US when they come to the States. I The main things that I looked at were, there was a magazine called Drum Magazine, that was published in Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and one gentleman actually scanned every single issue in 1969. So even though it wasn't the 1972, I had a really good sense of what were the topics of cultural interest to magazine readers. Everything from the politics of the day to the fashions to the hairstyles, all those kind of things. So that was a really good thing that kind of helped me, like, sort of enter the 70s. But I also read, I just read as many things as I could find. I found headlines, New York Times headlines of what was going on in Ghana. I did a lot of research on marriage court cases, legal cases, because so as you're aware in the book, a big part of the book is the polygamous marriage or the polygamous union, in the book. And so I did a lot of research about the law that governs marriage in Ghana, and then the cultural aspect of it, the inheritance aspect of it. So I did a lot of that kind of research. I read like NGO reports on, like, Ghana and, the culture and marriage. Um, yeah. And then I read proverbs as well. I read a lot of Ghanaian West African proverbs, because it was really interesting to me. I read the NGO reports and the headlines and stuff because I wanted to get a sense of, like, because I think sometimes when you're part of a culture, you don't really interrogate it in the same way as somebody from an outside point of view. But I really wanted to also understand what is the inside way of looking at marriage. So I was sort of toggling between those two things.
Okay.
I do have a question actually about the title.
Yes.
Um, my parents' marriage. I thought maybe I'd feel more clear about it once I read it and I realized, oh, there's something so beautiful about this because I don't understand. It feels so personal and it feels very universal at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Like my parents' marriage could literally be an experience that we're mimicking, and it could also be something that like anybody can pick up and attain to, right? Like this is what your parents' marriage looks like. This is what marriage and traditional roles look like. So I was just kind of wondering your inspiration behind the title and what that looked like. And I want to note, like, my confusion is what part of how I feel like the book is really beautiful because there are so many common threads of like patriarchy and feminism that like at least folks in cisgender identity have to navigate in order to be in a partnership like marriage, that I'm like, oh man, I wonder if this is a more personal story or if it's meant to feel personal but connected to one's own personal understanding of marriage, you know?
I think everything you said. Um,
Clocked it.
I chose that title. The book is obviously it's not written in first person, but
Yep.
I wanted the title to be in first person because as I was writing the book, I was thinking a lot about how whether your parents are married or not, whatever union is sort of like formative for you, it has a lot of, it shapes the way you can think about, or it can have heavy influence on the ways we think about relationships and union. And
Absolutely.
so I really wanted to enter it from that space for the character and for the book. She is somebody who is dead set against repeating or replicating her parents' marriage, but I wanted to invite readers that this is just her story, but we all have our own stories of how we enter into the unions that we're in, and why and what influences us. So I wanted readers to sort of be thinking about Kokui's, reasons, but also kind of take a step back and think about your own.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, because I think part of what I'm enjoying thus far, but what I'm also heartbroken around in Kokui's journey is her having to balance her own personal freedom and desire for change with the idea that there are roles in gender and in marriage, right? That like that you've named from the minute we meet her, she's actively trying to run away from that. And something we've spoken about as a group too, the irony of like thinking you would leave Ghana and not leave the patriarchy, but escape the patriarchy's clutches, only to end up in over here, like the worst place to be in terms of like wanting to escape, because the United States, of course, lends a false freedom, particularly if you have like a womanhood, an identity of femme or womanhood. So, uh, thank you. That's spot on with like what our group has been reading and naming and feeling. It's open up. Come on, folks. Any questions? Now's the time.
I do have a question. Was
Yes.
going into the book, and just to sort of put where I am in the book, the in-person book club is slightly behind the virtual book club, so I may not know as much as the people who join us weekly online. Um, but one of the things I went into the book assuming was that these were um, they were Muslims, that they would be Muslims, that the practice of multiple wives seems more connected to Islam than Christianity. Modern Christianity and modern Islam. And was there any sort of thought given to that to present like these sort of progressive Christians in Ghana as polygamists?
I wasn't thinking about that. I was just I was really thinking about the tension between the traditional society and the traditional culture and the modern culture that was sort of colliding, right? Like I was thinking about like my parents' generation and the generations before that, and the generation immediately before them were sort of really, really smack dab in the middle of that transition. Because yes, colonialism had started in the 1800s, but like once in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, that's when these questions of like, so culturally, like, what does this mean? Because you have the sort of onboarding of like, okay, some people like colonialism wasn't just like, oh, today, we run you. It was like a slow roll, a slow crawl. And a big part of it was cultural I don't know. I'm the word that comes to mind, but it's like it's sort of an offensive word, but like a cultural miscegenation is happening. So it's like the foods now suddenly like if you're exposed to like British food and you're like, oh, I like that like Marmite. I have a taste for Marmite, and all of these different things that are sort of we starting to like I don't like undermine and also like become part of the local culture.
Yeah.
And so there was a crisis because in traditional society, if a man had wealth, he broadcast that wealth by having wives, multiple partners, and kids, because kids were a symbol of wealth. So if you could be that guy who could have like 5 wives and 20 kids, that was a big thing. And even now, if you go to Ghana, like a chief who is like, the chief of the society, we went to one village and the guy had 121 children. And like that is like a symbol of largesse. You know what I'm saying? So for the men who were like, okay, our society now is kind of infused with British Moors, but it's also Ghanaian. But I grew up in Ghana or Gold Coast, whatever you want to call it, and I'm wealthy. I want a bunch of women. You know what I mean? That's part of what I think makes me a man. But you're now hitting, there's Christianity that's like, that's presenting a different way of like being holding status in society. So that status is now like, instead of having a big compound house that's filled with kids, now it's, I have a big house, but it's just me and my nuclear family. You know what I mean? So that tension was really felt like like the children of the 1920s, that tension was really felt by them, and then by their kids who were, like sort of like, okay, more firmly in that British way, because now they've been schooled in like British schools, and they've been going to church and doing all those things and trained by missions in mission schools. And now they're like, okay, like I'm getting married. I don't want to have like, multiple, I don't want my husband to bring another wife into this. But the guy is like, well, I kind of like that one. So it's just sort of figuring out as a society, which I don't think we still have figured it out, what who we want to be, because contact always leaves a residue. Like no matter what, when you meet someone, that exchange is going to have some sort of impression on you. It could be a lasting impression, it could be, a fleeting impression, but it's going to have some sort of residue. But it depends on like how I think that the question becomes like, how do you want to deal with that residue?
Hmm. I love how that's put. Yeah, beautiful. How do you want to deal with the residue? Any other questions, folks? Feel free to unmute.
When you look at men like Nick Cannon, I just get so sad. There's no way you could possibly give equal attention to 12 and 14 children. And then as a man, what are you saying to other younger men that this is cool? And reading the book just, brought thoughts of that, the men and this a ego thing, right? Power.
Tabitha, we could also shift it to women, right? Women that have multiple children as well. They can't, you know what I mean? Like you have to share the accountability because there's some women
But
that have multiple children and responsibility too.
but it's the man. You got to have sex with the man. So if you know you got 5 baby mothers, why would you want 5 more?
Same, like I said, same thing with women, right? Like I have one son. I knew that if I was gonna have another child, that I would have to split resources with that and time with with the second child, right? There's some that could manage multiple children, but then there's some they have their own, like I said, it's both ways, right? Having a lot of children, especially without a partner, there's many women that do that. Believe it or not, there's probably a kid or two that might feel away.
Yeah. It
Just,
just it
just to,
just made me sad for
Yeah.
the sisters. Because I would imagine you do look at your father differently if you know that he's had all these women and that he's broken their hearts. How do you
I
There's
just
You're
no
gonna
want
love
proof
him
that he's
because he's your
broken their
dad.
hearts, though.
But how do you respect him as a man, knowing that, you know, you could just look at a woman and have her? You don't care about how she feels or if it's disrespectful.
Tabitha, are you making certain assumptions about relationships? Like
No,
this?
I'm not making this. We're talking about the book.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
but
referenced
what?
that the sisters probably, I don't know, we're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the book.
no,
But
Thing
no
about
I
it,
problem.
think
in the
this is
book, they
what,
don't seem, none of the
I
women
had to
seem like
bring it
they're
back to the
unhappy.
book.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I think
that
this is what the tension that Nana is talking about. So you have multiple generations in this book. And so there's old, like the first two or three wives that they mentioned, their children are older and they have grown up in a culture and in a time where perhaps it was the norm to be one of many. And so there may not be a a, a feeling of like sadness or I'm one of many. Whereas the daughter, who's the main character, is a whole two generations um, beneath some of those first wives. And so her
Yeah.
perception, and she's also influenced, like the way they're in love with America, they're also influenced by what other cultures are saying are norm. And so I think this is the tension that she's speaking of as cultures and wars and leadership takes place. I would also push back and say that um, I mean, just to kind of echo her point, like our perspective from 2023 might be to have multiple kids is bad, or maybe for people of color is bad. But traditionally or historically, having a bunch of kids was actually great. And I would also say that there's segments of Black, African centered populations still that believe in populating the earth is like what we should be doing. And so they do have multiple wives and multiple kids here in New York. And my last point is just about the lens by which we look through culture. And so our American lens will dictate one thing. I also feel like people of color get a bad rap about having tons of kids, but oh, I can't. Elon Musk has 12. You never hear about it. So why do we shun Nick Cannon, a Black man, for doing it, who also has great means? But Elon is out here wild too with a bunch of kids. And then my last point, I really will be quiet. I'm also thinking about the style in which we parent. I have a 6-year-old. I give so much time to her. She's in all the classes. We playing games together. I wasn't parented like that. My mother wasn't parented like that. So also like if you're raised in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, if you had a house and a roof over your head and some food, that might have been the extent of your parenting. So that having multiple kids was not a big deal if you could provide. You were parenting, you were doing it because that's all that matters. Whereas now we invest so much time, money, energy into our children that I can't fathom having 2, 3. No, it's exhausting. But I parent differently.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone's perspective, and I'd love to see what Nanekwa
Mhm.
wanted to contribute because I know she's been waiting in the
I
tux.
just I wanted to say that in the book, the daughters and I would say many of the wives are unhappy with the behavior of this man. What, but so when I wrote the book, it was very important to me not to sort of apply some sort of judgment against even the father. I don't think the father is an evil man. Like that's why I mentioned that for me, this book is about culture and the different ways that when when we're exposed to sort of multiple ways of being and haven't resolved personally for ourselves the way we want to be, those hanging threads have impact. Like they're not going to get resolved on their own. And so you have something that's sort of above all of them, which is colonialism happened, right? Like, and it introduced a different way into a society. So right now, today on the books in Ghana, the three styles of marriage that are legal is one is monogamy, two, and there's polygamy that is, I guess, non-religious, but basically a Christian polygamy. And then there's Muslim polygamy between two Muslim
Right,
partners.
right.
Today, that is what is on the books. And a holdover from that time period is most people are I don't know if most, I haven't done that statistics, but I would venture to say that most Ghanaians are monogamous, in monogamous marriages. However, because this is unresolved in the culture, what it has created in our society in the Ghanaian society is a culture of infidelity. Because if you still today have a rich man, he has multiple girlfriends, everybody knows that. And if he takes on a second wife or his mistress and puts her up and takes care of her the same way he would his wife, or and even marries her customarily, though he is married in the church on paper, there no one is going to take him to court and say like, okay, you've done these women dirty, because it's still something that is accepted in our culture. And so that to me is something that I wanted to interrogate. So it's not, for me, I look at Mauli, the father figure, as somebody who is navigating, he's enjoying the spoils of his cultural privilege. He's like, look, I was poor, I built myself up, and now I have money, I'm charismatic, I like women. I'm gonna have as many women as I'm able to.
Mm.
And the women are lied to, they are, manipulated in some ways. Some women hold on for their different reasons, but they're also navigating a culture that is patriarchal,
Yeah.
and they don't have as many of the same privileges as their husband does. So that to me is what the book is about.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really appreciate that everyone's perspective and everyone's insight. And thanks for even sharing some of our own personal perspectives and our own personal stories, right? That's what coming in community is about. Nanekwe, I did want to, I don't even know, how's it already 8 o'clock? Oh my goodness, time flies
Yeah,
and
I
we're
have to
having a
leave the
good time.
group.
Thank you,
Nice,
Tabitha.
Thank you so much,
nice meeting
Tabitha.
you.
I
You
appreciate
wrote
your
a lovely book.
perspective. Thank you.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, I'm not sure
Bye,
how it's 8 o'clock.
Tabitha.
Bye-bye.
But time always flies when we are in the thick of it. I did want to bring up like 2 points of writing. I wanted to also name this echoing everyone's sentiment. You are a beautiful, deeply gifted writer. It has been a pleasure to sort of understand these greater themes of colonialism, patriarchy, feminism, and self-worth in really implicit, a lot of this is conversation. Um, and oh no. Oh no.
You're muted, Ron.
So hey everyone, I think Paula's connection dropped, but she was just sort of singing your praises. One of the things that I kind of noticed, or I was wondering about, and it kind of reflects on what you just said. So what is the like what does the women's movement look like in Ghana? Like I'm assuming that I'm assuming because I have an American brain, but like feminism sort of crossed the planet almost at the same time, like in the 60s and 70s, when it's and I'm attaching that feminism to the understanding that you should not be, you a woman should not be in a relationship with a man who already has a wife or two or three, or even like be in a committed relationship with a man that has two or three relationships already. Was there any thinking around like we as women or you as women need to move beyond this sort of cultural practice, which is perpetuated under patriarchy?
So it's so interestingly, somebody asked about like sort of the research that I did. I think it was Nicole. One of the things that was a big hot button issue was polygamy. In across Africa, in Kenya in particular, there was a big debate in the court about like, I'm married to this man and now he's brought another woman. He should not, he has to consult me first before he brings another woman into this thing. And that was something that was really bubbling in the magazines that I read. It was, similar. The pill was a big thing, and, birth control, all of those things were big issues. So that was happening. And again, I come back to the culture is very, very strong. Like it's something that I'm sort of keep getting confronted with myself, like just, as I, think about this topic. It's one thing to be sort of engaging with and advocating for change, but when people have been doing things for millennia, um, your whole concept of what your aspirations in life are sort of woven into that. And so it's really hard, very few people have the sort of fortitude to decouple. I mean, you can interrogate it and you can push for change, and that's what's happening and what was happening. But to really say, like, okay, I quit marriage until it matches what I need it to be, that is a bigger conversation and question. And so I think one of the things that I was also really deliberate about is that the women in this book don't need this man financially. And that was important to me because I didn't want it to be like, oh, they're poor, he's just taking care of them. No, these women are with this man because they love him. They like him, they want him, they want this. And they are heartbroken. And for some just choose to leave, some choose to stick it out and elbow the next woman away. But it's sort of like, how do we actually deal with these things in our culture and in our society that are not advantageous, that we do not like, but are part of the collective we are, practically.
I love that you said that because um, Nana Ekwe, for me, I guess about the wives and the competition and all and the suffering. But really, your book to me is so different because we see the effects of polygamous marriage on children. It is the only book I have read where there are many wives, or even TV shows, um, where we actually see the real painful, devastating effects on the children emotionally, as well as in self-worth, and, and also in matters of inheritance. Because, for generations, there may be squabbling among the children over inheritance. And so to me, your book, the title really makes sense to me because yes, the wives are definitely, key, but it's the children that you make a difference when you write. So I'm wondering, having said that, when Paula asked about the title, to me, that was one of the major reasons that you chose that title, because I could see each of those children talking about, Mawuli Nugu's marriages to their mother, all of them. But my question is that anyhow related to why you created that history of Nugu marriages at the beginning in the frontispiece?
Yeah. It was thank you so much, Lavon, for saying that, because it was important to me to show, because one of the things that, you know, and I'm sure this is happening across African contemporary, you know, society today, but I know that in Ghana in particular, generations of people and families are fighting over inheritance because their father or their grandfather has passed away. He was wealthy, but he had a lot of wives, he had a lot of, you know, children, and now the children are in court because, you know, they're fighting over who has the legal right to that inheritance. And that was really, it was interesting to me because, again, it's where the law collides with culture, because the law is trying to I don't know, trying to like sort of figure out a way to make everyone happy. And so, but culturally and traditionally, if you're the eldest male, you have privilege over, you know, the eldest female or the female children. So that's one. But if you come from a matrilineal society, which is why, like, for example, this is very subtle, and if you're not Ghanaian, you wouldn't know this, but like the stepmother in the book, Auntie Hema, she is Akan. And the Akan people are matrilineal people. So the Ashanti people are matrilineal. So they inherit through their mothers. So when you have inter-ethnic marriage, that is another sort of thing that becomes quite interesting, because my mom would tell me that like she went to school with a lot of Ashanti people, and when the father would die, they would get kicked out of the house by their aunt because their aunt's like, that's my house now." So that was a real thing until Ghana's former first lady just died. In 1985, she pushed super hard, and a law passed that if the man creates a will that says, I expressly want to leave things to my wife and children, then that overrides the cultural law, if you will, or the cultural tradition. So again, it's this tension between what the culture would do versus the piece of paper, the law. And that is something that is sort of like we keep coming back to. And marriage felt like the perfect way to talk about it, but also the kids, because, okay, the couple, they're not going to be around forever, but what is the lasting legacy of that? Um, yeah, so that was important for me to bring to the fore.
Okay, one more question real fast. Why doesn't Mouli tell each wife they'll be entering a polygamous marriage? I don't, because I know I was loving him. He's charismatic, he's ambitious. His smile, I mean, I could see that smile that you mentioned in the book several times. He's has irresistible swag. He's super successful businessman. He's savvy, he's intelligent. But then there's his deception. Why did you give him that trait?
Because he is also somebody who is grappling with this cultural tension, because, you know, he is a child of colonialism. And so he is somebody who also wants to be respected in the society, in the wider society. You know, he's doing business with Europeans. I mean, this is a tension for him. So he doesn't want to be tagged as I'm a polygamous man. He is, but that's also who he is. You know what I mean? So he would rather have a woman take her, then take another woman, and then, oh well, you know, you discover afterwards that, you know, this is the situation that you're in. And with Kokui's mom, he takes pains to kind of keep her separate, and they have a whole other life, and she thinks it's just the two of them. And that becomes the sort of like explosive betrayal between them, that when that is discovered. So again, it comes back to this tension of who do you want to be? And yeah.
Helpful, because I wasn't thinking that he was also ensnared in, like you were talking, the residue, um, the SHIT, in other words, the residue. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure I have, any more empathy for him, but at least intellectually, I can appreciate that he too is ensnared in this and he wants to be seen in one way, meanwhile practicing another way. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I mean, we know eventually, we already know that there's some empathy created because the character literally goes back home because he's sick at some point. We just haven't gotten there in the book. So we know the intention in moving in story. And I do want to shout myself out because I actually always hate the male characters in every book we read because why not? It's fun. But um I liked the dad from the beginning, which was a shock to a lot of our members, I know. And I wanted to name that where we are in the book right now, with 20 minutes left to go, I really don't trust Boris. I really can't stand him. I feel like he's trifling. I feel like he's lying about why him and his cousin were like not driving the taxi, but I know that'll all come out in the wash, so I'm not even worried. What I did want to ask you is that basically chapter 20 straight through like 22, 23, 24, they happen quickly, but we do see our characters sort of advancing in like wanting to figure out what takes a successful marriage. And also, I would argue she's in the beginnings of doubt. Like we see her like beginning to question her own dynamic with her husband, right? Once, and I just want to like commend that's the scene where her when Sammy slaps Frema, um, just that writing about how, when somebody brought it up earlier, the impact that certain marriages or certain parenting relationships have on us in real time. I think that was a really beautiful moment, and it wasn't necessarily written like because of Kokui's past, this was very difficult. No, we saw her really heartbroken, wanting to be there for her friend, wanting to kind of stop Sammy from his craziness, and also wanting to press her husband as to like why were they in this situation. So I just wanted to commend that was like a very masterful piece of writing, and then just sort of ask, that is a high point of tension, and I'm wondering like when we're writing these points of tension about marriage in the book, what sort of inspiration or what sort of pieces from media or other things are you taking to curate that kind of story, you know?
I was thinking, I mean, you can't write a book called My Parents' Marriage and not think about your actual parents' marriage or
Right.
about, marriage. And my mom, by the way, is always like, make sure you tell everyone this is
That
not
was
about
not me.
marriage. So, mommy, I've said it, it's not about, and it's not about their marriage. But I was thinking a lot about, I was thinking about the fact that my parents were very young. And so when I was a kid, they had like, all their friends, like, I just saw so much of their friends' relationships play out. I saw different things that I was just like, wow, like, and I would also talk to like later on I would talk more about it like with as adults with like some of my Ghanaian friends, but like one of my friends was like, "Oh my gosh, like you wouldn't believe it. My uncle, he's married in Ghana, but came to the States, married someone else, and then like now he has more children with this wife here, but now the other wife is coming and like no one knows." Like,
Oh my God.
and it was just like that was something that I never really thought about. Like, I thought about it in the sense of like, this idea of men are dogs, but I never stopped to really think about like the culture that was like, the where that all comes from.
Hmm.
And so this book was an opportunity for me to really kind of sit with that because in a society where, that is very patriarchal, even when there are matrilineal, it is, matrilineal in some respects. Um, a man then can control the family in a certain way or control the wife in a certain way. And I wanted to kind of be real about that. Like, just these people might have moved contexts, but there is still domestic violence. There is still, you know, making decisions, that are like ways to maybe belittle your wife or back your wife into a corner. And they all like, I feel like if the book were to go on longer and we see more of the marriage, like you'd see them working through these things. Um, but they're young and they're in that moment of like, we're building our lives, and we're going on what we want, but also what we've seen and what has been. And that's a messy place, like for anyone, like that's a messy place to be. So that
Yeah.
was important. And I think too, for Kokui, because her anxiety is not replicating a bad marriage, she is very switched on immediately when she notices the dynamic between Sami and his wife is like off. And so she's so scared that like anything that is sort of not the happy story is going to sort of pollute or infect her own marriage. And so I
Mm.
think that that is why like she has empathy, deep empathy for Frima, but she's also like tries to keep her at arm's length because she's like, if I get too close, it might infect me.
Yeah.
So, so yeah.
I love that you said that because I'm even thinking about when Frima was like, we should cook, and Kokui to herself was like, well, I'm hungry. I didn't say I was wanted to cook, right? Like, and even in that was sort of a rejection, right, to how she would naturally react. So I appreciate that. I want to name that we have 15 minutes left, so I'm just gonna do real quick reminders, and then we'll get back to the chat. Finish the book next week for those of you that are with me virtually. I will put the in-person assignment for next week for those of you that usually join in person. If you're joining with me next week, finish the book. Um, I just wanted to remind folks, and I wanted to name that in our chat. I'm going to start bottom going up. Levon asked, but matrilineal is about the mother's brother, yes? Matrilineal, Levon, is actually just about the woman, the heir, the daughter, I don't know, Nanakwe, if you want to
I
add.
just wanted to quickly clarify. So what matrilineal can ultimately means inheritance wise is if your father were to die, his sister inherits. So
That's the mother's brother.
so the father's sister would inherit the estate, because the idea is, I don't know, like the sort of colloquial way to think of it is like, I don't know who's your daddy, but I know who your mom
Who your
is.
mama is, yeah.
So that is the kind of idea behind that. So yeah.
Oh, that sounds so true, but so triggering for so many cultures. And then Opal, this is a great question. I don't know if you wanted to, if you're in a position where you can unmute yourself, or if you'd like, I'm happy to read it for you. I'm
I
gonna
could
assume.
I could unmute. So as I was going over the records of Nuka's marriage, right, I noticed, and then that Micheline, her marriage is not ordained, and she's been with him so long, she's been holding on. Like, how does she not know it? Because his fifth wife, Auntie Ima, her marriage is ordained.
Yeah, so that is as I mentioned to you, when I was doing research, I did a lot of marriage law, like legal research on like the cases that came up. So there are lots of gray areas, because if a man enters a customary marriage, it is polygamous. It can be polygamous, but I ostensibly under the law, he should the him and his wife should agree on bringing someone new into that relationship. But that's not what happens. If so that's one piece of it. But the other piece of it is that you can have multiple wives, but if you have an ordinance union, that union is then it becomes against the law. Like then it becomes an illegal marriage, because you can't, those two things don't match up under the law, and they will not be recognized as a marriage. So because Mauli, his situation, he's not that clear with these women. He's not clear at all about the details of their unions. But also too, one of the things that I found when I was digging into the legal judgments around marriage is if a man dies and he has two wives, um, the a lot of times the two wives will go to court to fight, like, for the estate or whatever. And in one particular case, there was a man who had an ordinance wife and he had a customary wife. And the customary wife, so one of the implications of ordinance union is that the law gives them the wife or the widow of that such a man a very clear stake. I think they get 1/9 of the estate. Like that's just what the law says they get. But with customary marriage, there isn't that piece of paper that says that. So this woman in this one legal judgment I read had to, the judge said, you know what? Prove that you are married. Assemble as much documentation as you can, photographs, letters, whatever you can do. And she did all of that. And then the judge was like, I'm looking at this documentation. Yes, I see that you are married, but under the law, it doesn't meet the burden of proof. And so therefore, there's still a lot of gray areas with this kind of thing. So yeah, that's why I'm saying, like, it's something that we still haven't resolved. It seems clear, but it's not.
I had a question about in the book, in terms of the inheritance. So it seems we talked about this a little bit in last week in the online group. It seems like there's an assumption that the two sisters are going to inherit. Like he wants them to run the company, and that his assumption is the assumption is that they will be inheriting. So it's kind of interesting because one, they're the last two children to be born of all the children, and there are other older children, other male children. And one of the questions that came up is the other wives, other than Auntie Hema, who doesn't have children, the other wives have divorced him. And in the book, Micheline has not divorced him, and it seems like she hasn't divorced him so that then her daughters do have the right to inherit. And because the other mothers did divorce him, they gave up the right for all those other children to inherit. So it's all, I think that was my understanding.
Yeah,
That's how we talked about it. But everything you're saying is so confusing about
I know the
what
law.
really would happen here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the book. It's a novel, so we don't really know. But under everything else that you're saying about ordinance and customary, what would actually happen in that family?
So you'll see what happens at the end of the book, but
Okay.
just to say that Micheline is under a false assumption. She's going by, I guess, pillow talk of, this is what he's promised me, this is what it is. But in reality, I think what she really means is she believes that she has a stronger stake because the two people are the two that are left married. She is the one with the children, and the Auntie does not have children. But the reality is that within Ghanaian society, the next of kin who have the strongest thing is not the wife, it's the children. She's also banking on the fact that most of the older children don't live in Ghana anymore. And many of them don't want anything to do with this man. Like they've just moved on with their life and they're living their lives abroad. So she's just taking it on that basis of, like her children have the strongest opportunity to inherit their father's wealth. So that is the thing. But again, it's murky because the ordinance wife has a clear stake under law of what she can get. And when a man has multiple wives and multiple children, that ordinance wife's stake gets stronger because hers is clear. Whereas now, if it's, we have an eldest child, maybe the eldest male is with the third wife, but it's all kind of, it's all over the place. But it's fascinating because I'm not by any, I'm not a legal expert on this, a marital legal expert, but the little that I, was able to sort of delve into, and it was just fascinating to me.
And is it the case that if you get divorced, that your children no longer are
No,
entitled to any
that's
inheritance?
not the case at all.
Okay.
That's not the case. But the thing is that if the thing is that if it also comes down to who's willing to fight. And the idea that Micheline has is these women have divorced, their kids are not in the country, so they are not, you know what I mean? They're probably not going to be vigorously going after things. So she is basically putting her stake in the sand as like, I'm staying because my husband has told me that, my kids are going to get everything. And that's why she's wanting, like, she's trying to push her daughter to like work for him and, get to know the business and understand everything because she wants it sort of sewn up for her kids.
Yeah. It's an easy win in her mind,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. Awesome. Well, awesome question, not awesome. That she's under the wrong impression.
Mm.
4 minutes on the clock. I don't believe it. Anyone else?
Do
I don't
I
want to hear
do
next week. You're like, oh, we should have asked. We should have said.
I do have a question about coming to America to go to college. It
Mm,
feels like Erie College is like Harvard. And I'm just wondering like how in Ghanaian society, um, is it about just going to college or is it specific to, you know, Harvard? I'm making certain assumptions. Harvard may be more prestigious than Erie, but for a Ghanaian, it is just coming to America to go to college, whether it's Harvard or Erie College.
No, I think that's so funny. Yeah. I think that for Boris in particular, he just wants to get out. And this is an opportunity for him to get out, and so that's great. I think if you notice that, when Kokui shares that she's also gone into Erie, her mom is like, that's a community college. Like, that's not something to be so proud of. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I think it's not seen the same way in Ghana. Yeah, Harvard is definitely better than a community college. But the idea for Boris in particular and for Kokui is that they just want to leave. And at that time, if you got acceptance to a university in the States, you automatic like there was no issue getting a visa. You could just go. So this was their ticket out, and
Mm.
it was exciting for them. So it did feel like, that for them.
And also, Boris has no inheritance. I mean, I love that you
Yeah.
make it clear to us that his brother has like taken all the family,
Right.
assets.
Right.
And, that's just the way it is, taking over the house, taking over the other assets, taking over the business. And so Boris is like, well, Boris seems to be ambitious. So what else can he do? Because
Right.
he's not going to get anything.
Absolutely.
You did a great job showing us that.
Yeah. I agree.
So did you have a favorite character?
I mean, I love all of them in different ways. I felt a lot. I felt for the women very much as I was writing them for each of them. I just felt for them. I felt like, for all of them, I felt for them really hard. But I also loved Mauli. I thought he was he was just I appreciated him for who he was. He wasn't, though he was a liar, he also was being true to himself, and so sort of, kind of. So I appreciated all of them.
Yeah. Initially, I would say probably Kokui was my favorite, but then ultimately I ended up loving Mitchell and Auntie Hema. Yeah, but you wrote such strong characters too.
I wanted to name that Renee has a great question
Oh, please, thank
in the
you.
chat. Yeah, thank you, Lavon. And the question is, I'd like to know what the author is reading. And given that it's 8:30, I do want to feel, I would just want to say like that's a great place to close out. So what are
Yeah.
you reading? What are you into? Let us know.
I just finished reading Jonah's Gourdvine by Zora Neale
Mm,
Hurston.
mm.
And just before that, I read Their Eyes Were Watching God, and I was like on fire. Like I texted my friend, I was like, I am on fire reading this book right now. So those are the two books that I just finished.
Awesome. Yeah.
We read Their Eyes Are Watching God. We read that in the book club last year, this past year.
So
Yeah.
good. Oh my goodness.
Classic.
Yeah. Do you
Well,
see similarity between Zora Neale Hurston's writing and your own?
Oh wow. I mean, what that would be very high praise. I what I think is what I appreciate about her work so much, because I was starting to dig into like her life because I was so drawn. And one of the things that I found interesting was that when Their Eyes Were Watching God came out, Richard Wright and some other male writers of the time like really kind of badmouthed the book and said it wasn't about anything. And I thought to myself, like, I could really relate to, this idea that, like, to write about something, you have to write very pointedly about, the issue, race or colonialism. But I think that I wonder if, as a woman, as women, our sort of turn to domestic situations, romance, love, whatever. For me, those are very rich ways to examine the same ideas of, patriarchy, culture, all these different things. And so I really kind of felt for Zora Neale Hurston that was sort of the reception she got from like, Black male intelligentsia of the
Yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah,
Wow.
really poignant. Thank
yeah.
you so much. Well, naming that our good time always comes to an end, but it is never, it's only temporary.